Developing this morning, an AirAsia plane has vanished in flight on its way to Singapore. These are photos of the missing AirAsia plane taken in 2010 and 2013. 162 people were on board the plane when its crew lost contact with air traffic control early Sunday. Dozens of people, including relatives and friends of passengers on board the flight, are waiting for news this morning. Aviation experts say the area the plane was flying through was experiencing severe and violent thunderstorms.
It does look as though the pilot requested an alternative route, but what has happened is that possibly, and it's only speculation at the moment, it might have been hit by thunder and might have gone down.
Authorities say the plane took off from Indonesia heading for Singapore. Both countries are now searching for the missing plane. A community gathered last night to remember a 9-year-old boy who was kicked to death a year ago by his mother. Omari Varela's death has sparked debates about child abuse and on how those cases should be handled. In this lapel video from June of 2013, officers respond to the home of Cynthia Varela Casaus and Stephen Casaus. A disturbing 911 call was made that day. Stephen can be heard threatening Omari. 6 months later, at just 2 days after Christmas, Omari died. His mother, Cynthia Varela Casaus, was arrested, charged in his death. At first, she claimed the boy fell and hit his head, but later admitted to kicking him over and over before finally calling for help. His stepfather, Stephen Casaus, is also behind bars for his role in the boy's death. Last night, family, friends, and strangers released balloons into the sky and lit candles as they shared stories.
I just feel his voice needs to carry on. Like, it's sad it took his life to get the state's attention.
Luminarias lined the way to Omari's headstone. It was covered with Christmas decorations and stuffed animals.
I hope he gets the justice he deserves.
Cynthia Varela Casaus is set to go on trial next year. Coming up in our next half hour, we take a look at Omari's case and the effects it's had here in New Mexico. Police say a pedestrian crash in northwest Albuquerque has turned deadly. It happened at Golf Course Road and Irving at about 10:30 last night. Police say the pedestrian may have been drinking when they stepped into the road and was hit. They were rushed to the hospital where they died. Police have not released any names and say the driver isn't facing any charges. A car was snatched in broad daylight at an upscale Albuquerque shopping center. Viola Martinez was taking advantage of end-of-year sales at ABQ Uptown on Friday. She was returning to her SUV parked outside this Pottery Barn when a man wearing dark clothing approached her and grabbed her purse.
I was pulling till my purse got torn. He saw that that wasn't going to do, so the next thing he did is grab my keys, my car keys, my vehicle keys, and he jumped in the vehicle and drove off.
That car had about $800 worth of gifts inside. The incident may have been captured on Pottery Barn's surveillance system. A man accused of slashing tires and sketching profanity on cars in the city went in front of a judge yesterday. Police say Wade Goodyear has admitted to more than 5 vandalism cases in which victims are reporting more than $15,000 in damages. His bond has been set at $10,000. New York City is in mourning this weekend after the funeral for an officer who was gunned down while sitting in his police car. Rafael Ramos is being remembered as a loving father who was dedicated to his church and to the force. Now, people across the nation are coming together to show support for the law enforcement community. Brian Yennis has the details.
More than 20,000 officers packed the streets around Christ Tabernacle Church in Queens as the funeral was held for NYPD officer Rafael Ramos. The father of 2 boys and his fellow officer Wen Jin Liu were murdered while sitting in their patrol car last weekend. At the funeral, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio talked about the devastating effect the killings have had on the city.
All of his brothers and sisters of the NYPD feel his loss, because they too followed that journey to serve others. They too accepted those risks, and they persevere despite the pain.
Critics have said de Blasio didn't do enough to support the police department before the shooting in the face of ongoing violent and destructive protests. Some officers even turned their backs to the mayor at the funeral. But across the country, rallies are being held to support those who work in law enforcement. In Boston, more than 100 people held signs and lit candles to thank officers for their service. And a sea of blue took over downtown Cleveland as thousands marched in support of local departments.
Those people, those individuals are just as much members of the community and want to come home at the end of their shift, just like the teacher, the broadcaster, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. They all want to come home at the end of their jobs.
Officer Liu's family also attended the service. His funeral will be held at a later time. Police Commissioner Bill Bratton says the two will be partners for all time. In New York, Brian Yennis, Fox News.
NYPD Police Commissioner Bill Bratton spoke at the funeral yesterday in front of 20,000 police officers. He says the two officers were killed because of their uniforms. The Empire State Building was lit last night to commemorate both Ramos and Officer Liu, his partner. Bratton will be on CBS's Face the Nation today. You can catch the interview right here on KRQE. In Arizona, a 24-year-old rookie police officer is dead after being shot by a domestic violence suspect who then killed himself. Flagstaff police say the shooting took place yesterday in a residential area as officers were searching for a male suspect in a domestic violence incident that had occurred earlier in the day. The suspect shot Officer Tyler Jacob Stewart in the head. He was taken to the hospital where he died. The suspect, Robert W. Smith, then took his own life. A suspected drunk driver nearly ran over several police officers last night trying to drive off from a DWI checkpoint. Albuquerque police tells us the driver of this black Ford truck was passing through a DWI checkpoint near Eubank and Constitution around 12:30. While talking with an officer, the driver hit the gas to get out of the checkpoint, and as the driver sped into a neighborhood, police say they lost control, crashing into a parked car and flipping the truck into someone's front yard. A total of 5 people were inside. 1 man was thrown out and pinned. 3 of those people inside the truck were sent to the hospital. APD says the driver was arrested and charged with DWI and eluding police. There's new information on the house fire we first told you about last night. Albuquerque fire crews responded to the blaze near Old Coors and Central. They tell News 13 the fire started inside a shed and quickly spread to a nearby house. Firefighters were able to get the fire out quickly. No word if anyone was hurt in that fire. Head to KRQE.com for the latest information. Family, friends, and strangers gathered to remember Omari Varela yesterday. The 9-year-old's mother is charged with stomping him to death a year ago. The boy's case has had a big impact in the state. It cost one officer his job and led to changes in how the state and city now deal with child abuse charges. Alex Goldsmith looked into those changes.
3 APD investigations and 9 CYFD referrals were not enough to save Omari Varela. That brought both agencies under intense scrutiny and led to a lot of questions. Some wondered if they were on the same page.
It makes no sense for an officer and caseworker to investigate the same incident and never share notes.
That was one of the changes Governor Susana Martinez ordered in the wake of the Omari case, requiring CYFD caseworkers to seek out police reports. Also,
for any family in New Mexico that has faced 2 CYFD investigations, I am directing CYFD to perform a supervisory level review of every subsequent CYFD investigation.
As for APD, a city task force found the department needed better child abuse training for officers and updated policies. An even bigger change was proposed statewide, Omari's Law. It would have made it easier for CYFD to take custody of kids in suspected abuse cases. So much easier, CYFD estimated 5 times more kids would have been removed from their homes.
I think we all agree that it's better to be overly protective of our children.
Not everyone was on board.
I was a little bit worried about the fact that some children might be unduly traumatized and removed from their homes unnecessarily.
While Omari's Law passed the House, it died in the Senate without a vote. Alex Goldsmith, KRQE, News 13.
Just recently, Governor Martinez announced the CYFD secretary was being replaced by the current state tourism secretary, Monique Jacobson. It's unclear if the Omari case played a role in that decision. Despite the problems with the Albuquerque Police Department, they say they have one of the strictest body camera policies in the nation, so strict it's hard to follow. According to the Albuquerque Journal, the department is crafting a new policy and putting it in place as soon as next year. City officials and the feds signed a deal to overhaul APD following a federal probe into the department after dozens of officer-involved shootings. While the agreement includes more training for officers, some critics say there isn't much in there about lapel cameras. In some of the deadly shootings involving police, cameras were either turned off or not on. The police department that patrols the small town of Jal is getting on body cameras. The Hobbs News Sun reports that Jal has budgeted enough for a new police dog and for the on-body cameras for officers. Jal's interim police chief says those cameras can help make the department down there more transparent. Well, paid time off of work for parent-teacher conferences. A state senator is pushing for just that, saying it would increase involvement in our public schools. Employers in New Mexico are required to give staffers 2 hours leave to exercise their right to vote, and soon they could also have to give employees paid time off for parent-teacher conferences.
Some of the results that you see are better test scores, better grades, promotion to the next grade level.
Albuquerque Democrat Michael Padilla is backing the bill that would provide 2 hours paid leave in the fall and spring semesters for parents or guardians to meet with the child's teachers. Employees would have to request the time off at least a week before the meeting, and employers could require a signed note from the teacher. Padilla says several states already have a similar law.
North Carolina, Michigan, Massachusetts, California, where some of the highest results are for their public education systems. The parents are significantly more involved because they have this type of paid time off.
In turn, Padilla says that means kids are more likely to focus and to study. In a state with a high school graduation rate of 70.3%, people we spoke with in Albuquerque are on board with the proposal.
I think that'd be a neat idea. Being an involved parent, I think that's the key for a child's success.
As it's written now, the bill would let employees take civil action if they request leave for a parent-teacher conference and they're punished for it. Target practice stopped abruptly for a group of men when one of them took a bullet to the hip. Deputies say 2 groups were shooting at a large hill in the West Mesa yesterday when a bullet hit Jason KRQE. His friends drove him to a hospital where he was treated. Fortunately, it was a non-life-threatening injury and is doing well this morning. When BCSO got out to the hill, several shooters scattered. They're still not sure if the shooting was an accident or not. A suspected car thief whose acting helped him escape from a hospital got his court date pushed back. Jason Smith was first arrested earlier this month, accused of ramming police cruisers on back-to-back days with a stolen vehicle. He crashed into a ravine and was arrested, taken to UNM Hospital with injuries doctors and deputies believed were serious enough to keep him from walking for weeks. So BCSO let their guard down.
And that was an assessment that we made based on the medical advice, that I made based on the medical advice. And obviously, in retrospect, Mr. Smith is a pretty good actor, apparently.
On Tuesday, deputies say Smith walked out of the hospital, stole a van, and fled. They caught him Friday night in another stolen vehicle, this time a truck, at an Albuquerque gas station. Smith was set to appear in court yesterday, but another medical issue pushed his hearing back. The man police say shot someone at an apartment complex appeared before a judge yesterday. Juan Fusilier faced a first-degree murder charge. Police say he killed a man at the Sun Point Park apartment complex. Investigators believe the shooting was gang-related. He's being held on a $350,000 bond.